Hey guys, welcome back to Wrestle News 365. Hope everyone is doing very well, having a good Thursday. As always, there is a ton of news stories to get into today, especially coming out of last night's AEW Dynamite and WWE NXT. So let's get straight into today's stories, and let's start off with a possible addition to the WWE creative team, that being former WWE Women's and Divas Champion Nikki Bella, because former two-time WWE Divas Champion Nikki Bella has recently spoke to Ashley Graham on the Pretty Big Deal podcast and brought up the possibility of joining WWE's creative team, while mentioning her brother-in-law Daniel Bryan's recent contributions to the creative process on SmackDown in WWE. Nikki said her past experiences as a full-time performer is an advantage as she knows, quote, what the people want and how to get the best out of each woman. She said, quote, I would love, there are times that because Brie's husband, Daniel Bryan, is part of the creative team and works a lot with Vince McMahon on creative stuff, and I've always thought in the back of my head, I would really like to do that for the women because I've lived it as a WWE superstar, but also because I'm a fan. She also added, quote, so it's I feel like I know what the people want, and then I know how to get the best out of each woman because I know them. So it'll be a lot of fun to be on creative. Now, this is a really interesting story because when this first made the rounds yesterday, because this is how these things work, they have the podcast interview, then it gets transcribed, and then one person puts it on a website, and then it explodes. And that's what happened yesterday. It exploded on social media yesterday. And to be frank, I was a bit disappointed by the amount of people that just completely ridiculed it and said, oh, what, Nikki Bella on creative? Oh, well, who is she? What does she know? Well, to be honest, regardless of what you think about Nikki Bella, her work in the ring, her work when it comes to promos, her WWE career, how she got where she is, her relationship with John Cena in the past, whatever you want to think about that, put that aside. There is no doubt she's been incredibly successful in WWE, outside of WWE. She's had a very successful career. She really has. So the fact that if she was to be on the WWE creative team, if she wanted to be on the creative team, if she got that invite to be on the creative team, why is that a bad thing? Why is that a bad thing? Now, yes, obviously, are there maybe too many people on the creative team at this point? That's probably the case. But frankly, new ideas aren't necessarily bad. New perceptions and new perspectives aren't necessarily bad. And I do think when it comes to the creative team, I don't really know the full ins and outs of the amount of people that are on there in terms of male and female. But should there be a larger female voice on the creative team? Absolutely. Should there be a female voice from people that have lived it and have worked it and have had success in WWE? There should. I think Nikki Bella being on the creative team of WWE wouldn't be a bad thing in the slightest. Who's to say she's got good or bad ideas? We don't know. You don't know until you're tried in that position. So I was a bit disappointed to see the people that straight away just jumped all over it to say, oh, it's a terrible idea. Nikki Bella, oh, it's laughable. Look, at the end of the day, she has had tremendous success in WWE. She's had tremendous success on her reality shows, and she continues to this day to have tremendous success. She's got a huge following on social media. There is a big population of people that really enjoy what she does and her content, and they want to see her back in WWE. And she has had success over a long period of time in WWE. She has lived it. She has had decent feuds, and she has had a plethora of time on WWE television. She does have experience. Now, would her time be best suited to be on the creative side of things, or would it be best suited to be in a producer role to actually work more hands-on with the talent? That's a different conversation there. Because the creative team's more like coming up with ideas for the storyline, more abstract stuff, whereas a producer role is getting the creative from the creative team, working with the talent, helping the talent to put that match together, put that angle together, make it all work in that sense of things. So I think that's different. I think that's a different conversation to have. So I was surprised. Well, I wasn't surprised because this is social media at this point, but I was disappointed to see the amount of ridicule of, oh, it's a terrible idea. Nikki Bella, what does she know? Well, she knows a lot, and she probably knows more than us fans would like to know. So I wouldn't have a problem with it at all, and I hope she does get an opportunity to work on the creative team. If that's what she wants to do, then why not have an opportunity? Why not? Why not? She's a future Hall of Famer. Right, she didn't get added in this year because of the pandemic, but she will be eventually. That'll be next year or this year at WrestleMania. So why not? Why not? I mean, we like to bash the creative process in WWE. There certainly is a plethora of people on social media and pro wrestling fans that like to criticize the creative. I have numerous times just here on the channel and on social media to say that certain ideas, certain angles, or the creative process in WWE is flawed, to say the least. So new ideas aren't necessarily a bad thing at all. And I do think there should be a heightened female voice on the creative team and in the creative process for WWE. There absolutely should, and that there should be more people on the creative team that have worked inside the ring. There seems to be this powerful trajectory when it comes to former WWE superstars. They come in and they act as producers. That is a good thing, and I've mentioned before they should continue doing that, but there also needs to be more former WWE superstars on the creative side of things as well. That's when the television people get involved. That's where the writers get involved from Hollywood, or like I said, from television or films or whatever. That's where they get involved, and do they really know the ins and outs and the inner workings of what makes a pro wrestling program great and work? I don't think they do. So I'm all for having more female voices on that creative team. I'm all for having more ex-pro wrestlers on the creative team. I think that's where you get the best and most creative stuff. So I'm not against it. So we'll have to wait and see what happens there. But I thought I wanted to start off with that one today. We have an update as well when it comes to Jay White. A lot of people are talking about Jay White at the moment, aren't they? Whether or not he's going to leave New Japan. Is his contract expiring? Isn't it expiring? How long does he have left? No time, 5 years. There is so much misinformation and discussion when it comes to Jay White at the moment. But we have an update on Jay White possibly joining AEW today, because there's been a lot of speculation, as I mentioned, regarding the future of Jay White with New Japan after the Switchblade said he was done with pro wrestling following his loss to Kota Ibushi in the main event of Day 2 of Wrestle Kingdom 15. Now, after that, it was later reported that WWE were making, quote, a strong play at White, and he had many people supporting him within the WWE. That was according to Super J-Cast. His contract with New Japan is up at the end of the month, at the end of January right now, and it's 50-50 whether he stays or goes in Japan. However, after last night's edition of AEW Dynamite, Night 2 of New Year's Smash, Tony Schiavone did the regular AEW Dynamite post-show on YouTube, and he was asked if White could potentially join AEW if he decided to leave New Japan. And Tony Schiavone made some very interesting comments here about Jay White. He essentially ruled out the possibility of having Jay White in AEW for a very long time. He said, quote, I don't think so. I think he's pretty much locked into what he's doing there in Japan. So that kind of lends on to the other reports that had stated previously by the likes of Dave Meltzer and others, that when AEW started up in 2018-2019, the EVPs, Tony Khan, they tried to reach out to Jay White. At the time, they tried to reach out and recruit Jay White, and at the time, Jay White reportedly told all the people in AEW that he'd signed a 7-year contract with New Japan. That was 2 years ago, so it would lend up that he has about 5 years left on his current deal. So that would make the most sense when it comes to that. So Tony Schiavone is essentially repeating what Dave Meltzer has reported before when it comes to Jay White's contract, so that kind of lends up. So I think the more that time goes on, I know there is still this discussion, especially with Royal Rumble season coming up and Royal Rumble at the end of the month coming up, and people like the new, people like the idea of someone jumping from one company to another. It's exciting. It gets people talking. I get that. But the more that time is going on now at this point, the more it does seem like that report and that rumor about Jay White having 5 years left, having a long amount of time, and this all being a work, that does seem more likely. And that was always what I thought it would be, frankly. I always thought that even if Jay White's contract was expiring, he would probably sign with New Japan. The only reason that this big discussion about Jay White and his future and would he move to WWE or would he go to AEW, the only reason that's really exacerbated over the last couple of weeks is from that original report from the Super J-Cast saying, oh, his contract's up at the end of the month, WWE wants him and it's a strong play. I don't know if they've been worked, I don't know. But it looks more and more likely to me at this point that he is going to be staying with New Japan because he has such a long time left on his contract. We're talking 5 years. That's a long amount of time. So Tony Schiavone almost confirming those reports that Jay White has a long amount of time on his contract still. Now, speaking of AEW and last night's Night 2 of New Year's Smash, the Good Brothers made their in-ring debut last night. On last night's AEW Dynamite New Year's Smash Night 2, Don Callis, Impact Wrestling Executive Vice President, made another appearance with AEW World Champion Kenny Omega. The Elite was originally scheduled to be in action after Matt and Nick Jackson joined up with their fellow former Bullet Club members on last week's show. Now, Don Callis did the introductions and ended out instead bringing out the Impact World Tag Team Champions, the Good Brothers, to team with Omega instead of the Young Bucks. This marked their in-ring debut in AEW. Now, the Young Bucks looked on a monitor in the backstage area, along with Tony Khan making a cameo, shaking their head, eventually walking away and looking very displeased with what went down and Callis's interference here. Omega, Gallows, and Anderson went on to defeat the Varsity Blondes and Danny Limelight when Gallows and Anderson hit the Magic Killer, on Limelight. The trio is set to be in action also Saturday night at Impact's Hard to Kill pay-per-view against the Impact World Champion Rich Swann and the Motor City Machine Guns. Now, I enjoyed the match. I think it was interesting, actually, that you had the reunion and you had the join-up last week of the Bullet Club of Gallows, Anderson, Omega, and the Young Bucks, and a week later you're already teasing the dissension there. And I think that's maybe too quick. I mean, I'm willing to wait it out and see what AEW has planned with this and what it has Impact has planned with this. I personally would have ridden it out maybe a couple more weeks at least, because it does look like, obviously, the plan is to do the Young Bucks versus the Good Brothers. That was always the plan, though, and we'll probably do a video talking about this in terms of an Impact perspective later today, but there was always the plan and always these reports that the Good Brothers were going to be facing the Good Brothers. That was what everyone expected, but last week when you had this big reunion with the Bucks, the Good Brothers, and Omega, it felt like at the time, okay, they're going to spread this out for a few weeks at least, or a couple of months. They're going to make the money and having the Bullet Club reunion, and then eventually they're going to turn on each other and they'll have the match. I don't know if it's the wisest thing to already tease that dissension 1 week later, even though the Young Bucks did look hesitant when they joined up with Omega and Gallows and Anderson last week. I felt that they would ride it out for a couple of weeks. That doesn't look to be the case. Now, it does make a lot of sense to me to have Omega and the Good Brothers team up on Dynamite, especially when you've got them teaming up on Saturday at Hard to Kill. You want to push people to go watch that pay-per-view. So I'm sure Impact would be very happy with that. In terms of the creative of that whole thing, it says to me we are getting the Good Brothers versus the Young Bucks, but it also says we might be getting it quicker than we thought. I don't know if that's the best idea. I don't know if that's the best timeline of things. I would prefer they took more time with it, but only time will tell. Maybe next week they'll all be friends again. I don't know. Maybe the Young Bucks will show up at Hard to Kill on Saturday. I hope that is the case, but it certainly does seem strange that 7 days later they're already teasing the group breaking up when they only got together 7 days ago. That does seem very, very quick for me. So we'll have to wait and see on that one. But it did seem a bit odd there. Let's move to WWE and talk about some contract details, because it was reported in the fall of 2020 that WWE had offered new contracts to the members of Retribution following their transition to the main roster. Now, it's been reported by Fightful Select, which of course is their Patreon service. Be sure to check that out and subscribe to them. That those deals were for 3 years at $250,000 per year. Now, it was noted that WWE offered the deal to each member of Retribution, to each member of the Retribution group, not including leader Mustafa Ali, who of course is on his own deal. The $250,000 per year 3-year deals are significantly lower than a lot of the incoming contract offers that WWE has made in the last 2 years, during a period where there has been more competition from other promotions, but also at a time where the pandemic has had an impact on everything when it comes to pro wrestling. Now, some of the recent WWE call-ups were told that they could possibly renegotiate their offers if and when things change, but there's no word on if Retribution members were extended the same courtesy or even if they actually signed those deals. Now, it was also noted that there have been talk of several WWE wrestlers who have opted to pass on renewing their contracts, choosing to wait until they have better leverage instead. On a related note, word is that not all recent call-ups from WWE NXT have been offered new contracts when they got to the main roster. It was noted by Dave Meltzer on a recent edition of Wrestling Observer Radio that some of the wrestlers are making the same money on Raw and SmackDown that they would have been making in NXT, and will be making the same money until WWE resumes live event touring or until they receive new contracts. Now, there's no word on which wrestlers have not received new deals when coming to the main roster, but not every call-up is receiving new contract offers. Now, obviously, this is a fallout of the pandemic and how WWE are changing things when it comes to contracts. And I think what is interesting here is just the sheer disparity of where they were 2 years ago to where they are now. You have to remember in 2019, when they were handing out those 5-year contracts to stop people going to AEW, they were handing out those massive contracts, but they were also incredibly inflated contracts. At the time, WWE was rolling in money. They'd got the money from the new deal of NBC Universal for the USA Network. They got the $1 billion from Fox for SmackDown on that network. They also had a huge amount of money from all the Saudi Arabia pay-per-views. There were a huge amount of money in that, and because of all of that money, WWE's stock price absolutely skyrocketed at the time, and they had more money than ever to spend on talent, to spend on TV, to spend on everything. So they were handing out these huge contracts, 5 years, huge amounts, massively inflated. They were offering significant amount of money for people just to stay at home. They were offering people new contracts with no intention to use them on TV, but just to keep them under contract, to stop them going to an AEW. They had so much money. And now that disparity from up here to down here now in 2021, where they're offering very small contracts for 3 years because of the pandemic, because of the money being reduced, I don't blame some of the WWE superstars for going, you know what, my contract isn't up just yet, I'll wait, and I'll see what happens. I think that's the right thing to do, because they can maybe believe, WWE, that, okay, when things pick up, you can renegotiate, but who knows if things are going to pick up? And what's the definition of things picking up? Once they go to start touring again, do they go to WWE, said, right, you told me I could renegotiate? They'll say, no, you've got time left on your contract. It's bad business on behalf of the WWE superstars. And at the end of the day, if you're an independent contractor, which WWE insists that you are, you have to look out for yourself. You have to look out for yourself first. So it doesn't make any sense for me to sign these lower deals when they're right. In a couple of months or in a year's time, when their contract is up or whatever, they can say, look, I want to, if you want to have me stay, give me a better deal, because I can leave. There is competition I can go to, regardless of the pandemic or not. So to me, that makes the most sense not to re-sign their contracts. And in fairness to WWE, it makes most sense to not give these massive contracts that they were given 2 years ago. Given the current climate, that doesn't make sense for them to be wasting that money like that. So it is a balancing act. That's negotiation, though. That's negotiation in life, in contracts, in pro wrestling, in all forms of entertainment. So I think there's going to be a standoff there for a while. And I think because of that, that might lead to more people jumping across because they need to get themselves the best deal possible, especially during a pandemic. And that might be with another company. That might be with the WWE. That might be somewhere else. Who knows? But I think this contract situation when it comes to not just WWE, but all of pro wrestling will certainly get a lot deeper over the course of the next couple of months. When people's contracts are expiring, I think people really have this leverage in negotiation now of saying, look, it's more of an even playing field when it comes to money now. Where is best for me to go? Where is best for me to go? Speaking of new signings and new contracts, the Rascalz, the former Impact Wrestling star, have made their debuts on NXT, known as MSK. They made their debuts last night on NXT on the USA Network. The MSK tag team, formerly known as the Rascalz in Impact Wrestling, is made up of Wes Lee and Nash Carter. Lee is former Desmond Xavier, and Carter is the former Zachary Wentz in Impact. WWE recently filed to trademark both of their new ring names. Last night's show saw MSK debut with a win over Isaiah Swerve Scott and Jake Atlas in the first round of the 2021 NXT Men's Dusty Rose Tag Team Classic. They will face the winners of Killian Dane and Drake Maverick versus Kurt Stallion and August Gray next. So it was obvious. It was very obvious that MSK was going to be the former Rascalz. They released the brackets yesterday, so there's a bit of a timeline of this. They released the brackets yesterday of what the Dusty Rose Tag Team Classic would be looking like this year. And there was way more teams than was previously announced. And then there was this mystery team, MSK, and everyone was saying, who is MSK? That was the trend, that was the hashtag on social media, who is MSK? Then NXT released the logo of what MSK was, the graphic of what MSK was, and as soon as they saw sort of the green and yellow and the way that MSK was written, it just screamed Rascalz. So I think everyone knew it was the Rascalz, and I think that was probably by design. People know who the Rascalz are, and once they release that graphic, obviously it's a two-pronged thing. First of all, you're going to want people to tune in because it's a mystery. Everyone loves a mystery. A whodunit, who is it, who's debuting, everyone loves a mystery. So that's the first thing. The second thing was, once they gave essentially the very big hint that it was the Rascalz, fans of the Rascalz, fans of Impact, people that might not have been watching NXT last night would say, you know what, I want to tune in because I want to find out who MSK is, but I also want to see the Rascalz debut because that's who it obviously is. So I thought they did a great job. I thought they did a fantastic job in their match last night. They are unbelievably talented. If last night was the first exposure you've had to MSK, the Rascalz, whatever you want to call them, I no doubt you'd been thoroughly entertained. They are incredibly, incredibly talented. I think there obviously was some concern with them going to WWE when you think about the main roster stuff. Frankly, when you think about Raw, SmackDown, how well will they do there? That's A conversation for another time. I think they do have to be wary of it. It's a conversation for another time, though. I think they'll have great success in NXT. They'll have fantastic success in NXT, and I think given the state of the tag team division previously, I think the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic is really elevating the tag team division in NXT because it was suffering for a little bit there. I think MSK, they're surefire to be NXT Tag Team Champions at some point. They just have to. They're just too talented. They're just too talented. And I think people like Triple H will be huge fans of them. So I'm excited to see what they do in NXT going forward. Talking about the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, we have 3 teams that advanced in last night in the 2021 NXT Men's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic on NXT. The Undisputed Era, which of course is Adam Cole and Roderick Strong, Grizzled Young Veterans, and MSK, they all advanced last night. Last night's main event of NXT saw the Undisputed Era defeat Breezango to advance. They will go on to face the winners of Tony Nese and Avira Davari versus Desmond Troy and Ashanti The Adonis, whatever you want to call him. So I think, as I mentioned, last night's show of NXT was obviously all about tag team wrestling, as it should be. I've been very critical here on the channel when we've spoken about NXT and just tag team wrestling in WWE. Tag team wrestling is an afterthought in WWE. It doesn't matter. Go watch an episode of Raw and SmackDown. It really doesn't matter. We had the SmackDown tag team titles change hands last week. And people are saying, oh, it's a big title change, it's massive. Ziggler and Rude, they won. Well, it doesn't mean anything. What does it mean? Where are the stakes? We have been conditioned as fans watching WWE for the longest time to say that tag team wrestling doesn't matter. Yes, it has its ups and its downs like that, but most of the time recently it's just been down here. It really doesn't matter. The stakes don't matter. There's no main event storylines. We're conditioned not to care. And I feel like that tag team, I don't know what the word is, but I think that feeling towards tag team wrestling has bled over to NXT slightly, which was a massive disappointment for me because NXT for a while was creating great tag teams, whether it was AOP, DIY, The Revival, American Alpha, the list goes on and on. They did create fantastic tag teams, and it felt like for a while the fact that tag team wrestling wasn't being featured in WWE that heavily, that affected NXT. And I was critical of that because it felt like for a long time just the rivalry when it came to tag teams in NXT was just Breezango versus Imperium. That's all it was for months. And not to discredit them, but I'm just saying, they can do better. There should be a way wider breadth of tag teams in NXT. That was the issue that I had with NXT at the time. So now that we've got the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic, it's almost like a massive reset, isn't it? It's a huge reset for tag team wrestling in NXT. You make all of these tag teams, you get tag team wrestling back in the main event scene, you make tag team wrestling mean something again, and now you've got all of these tag teams vying for positions, vying for a tag team title shot, and eventually they'll get a main event because they'll win the cup, and they'll get a main event because they'll go for the tag team titles, and it immediately makes tag team wrestling mean something again. That's really important. So I felt that last night's episode of NXT really showed how great tag team wrestling can be, and frankly, they have to build their tag team division because their competition, AEW, has the best tag team division in the world. And NXT would have to go a very, very, very long way to overtake AEW when it comes to tag team wrestling. Frankly, I'm not sure they ever can. And that's just because AEW's division is so deep, so strong. But it's important. Tag team wrestling can still draw. It does mean something. And I really enjoyed last night's episode of NXT because they had so much featured and focus on tag team wrestling. Now, speaking of the Dusty Tag Team Classic, let's move to the first ever women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic because several teams have been revealed for this first ever WWE NXT Women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. The first 4 teams have been announced for the 2021 WWE NXT Women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic. Man, that is a mouthful, by the way. But the following tag teams were announced during last night's NXT episode. Team Ninja, which is Katie Catanzaro and Kaden Carter. You got Mercedes Martinez and Toni Storm, Ember Moon and Shotzi Blackheart, and The Way, which of course is Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell. Now, the first ever Women's Dusty Classic will kick off next Wednesday night with Toni Storm and Mercedes Martinez versus Team Ninja. I'm really excited for it. In the same way that I felt like the men's Dusty Cup was a way to elevate and put a lot of focus and spotlight back on men's tag team wrestling, I think arguably the women's Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classic is actually far more important. I think it's far more important because the women's tag team championships in WWE, they still do have promise and they still do have potential, and of course they can be defended across all 3 brands. But ever since really its inception, we got a brief moment when the Women's Tag Team Championships were introduced, where it felt like we were going to have legitimate tag teams. Legitimate female tag teams with same entrance music, same gear, double team maneuvers, utilizing tag team psychology and philosophy, all of that stuff. It was exciting because that felt like the next evolution of women's wrestling in WWE. And they've gone away from it. They've gone away from it and they've gone to what they do with tag team wrestling in WWE, which is putting two singles wrestlers together. You're now the tag team champions. And any female tag teams they did have, whether it was the Iconics, whether it was Sasha Banks and Bayley, they split them up. They split them up immediately. And they have no rhyme or reason for, really. And it felt like they never had an intention to actually create legitimate female tag teams. This is what the Dusty Rhodes Women's Tag Team Classic does. It creates legitimate tag teams, and then we can have the Women's Tag Team Championships being defended on NXT, which they should be way more often. That's the main roster crossover that you want and need, especially if you want ratings opposite AEW. And you can have these tag teams come together and then they can go to the main roster. And then suddenly we have a strong and credible women's tag team division with actual female tag teams together. So I think this is far more important. Obviously, it's groundbreaking because it's the first female tournament that they've done when it comes to tag team wrestling. But I think it's far more important than that because it actually creates legitimate female tag teams, which is something we desperately need, I think, in WWE. So I'm very excited to see that play out over the course of the next couple of weeks. Let's go back to AEW because we have an update on the future of Erick Rowan, his status with AEW. Now, as reported previously, former WWE superstar Erick Rowan has not signed a contract with AEW, and his appearance during the Brody Lee Celebration of Life edition of AEW Dynamite was a one-off deal. Now, during last night's AEW Dynamite post-show, Tony Schiavone confirmed that Rowan was not yet a member of the AEW roster. When asked if AEW fans can expect to see Redbeard, Erick Rowan, in action again, he said, quote, "I believe Erick's appearance only came on that tribute show to his former tag team partner. However, Schiavone did not rule out the possibility of Redbeard returning to AEW TV again. He said, quote, "Then again, I say that, but who knows, he might show up tomorrow." As noted, Erick Rowan recently got a new tattoo in memory of Brody Lee. The tattoo features a sledgehammer similar to the ones used when Rowan and Harper were the Bludgeon Brothers in WWE, and it's a tribute to his former tag team partner. That's what I thought. That's what I thought when it came to Rowan in AEW. I felt that when people were saying at the time, "Oh, it means he's with AEW now," read the situation. Look at the circumstances at the time and look at the context. He made his debut, if you want to call it that, but he made his appearance on the Brody Lee Celebration of Life episode, which was a tribute to his best friend, to his tag team partner. That's why he showed up, and I'm really glad he was able to do that. I'm really glad he was able to show up and pay tribute, and the moment where he raised the sign and looked up to the heavens, I mean, it was one of the most emotional moments on the shows behind all of the Brody Lee Jr. -1 tribute at the end of the show. So I never felt at the time that means, right, Rowan's with AEW, he's going to be the new leader of the Dark Order, nothing like that. I never felt anything like that. To me, it always came across as just a tribute, just a way to pay homage to his best friend and his fallen tag team partner. That's what it came across to me. Like Tony Schiavone said, could something change in the future? Absolutely. But I think given what has happened over the course of the last month or so, is Rowan even ready to go back into the ring? Maybe you don't know how people take these things. And maybe he just wanted to take his time. And I was just really glad, as I mentioned, that he was able to pay tribute. He was able to be a part of that really special show. I think that was the most important thing there. So, I mean, anything could happen in the future, but I don't think it's right to be pushing that, okay, when's he coming? When's he coming? Because it wasn't about that. That appearance wasn't about getting himself over. That wasn't about him signing with AEW. That was about paying tribute. That's all that was for me. Speaking of AEW, the first ever AEW World Champion Chris Jericho has revealed that he did test positive for COVID-19 in September. Now, on the latest episode of Talk Is Jericho, Chris Jericho sat down with Dr. Alex Patel, a critical care ICU doctor based in Toronto, Canada, to discuss the current news of the COVID-19 pandemic as well as the progress of the current COVID vaccine. Now, during their conversation, Jericho revealed that he had tested positive for COVID-19 back in the fall of last year. He said, quote, "It is interesting because I hadn't told anyone this, but I tested positive back in maybe September and I had 0 symptoms. I had one of those ones you said. I had my 10 days in isolation and stayed away from everybody. I didn't even know that I had it. I went and got a test in general, and it's one of those ones that said you're positive, and I went, really? You serious? And I had nothing. I didn't have a headache, I didn't have a cough, which is a very lucky thing, but on top of that, once I did have it, and it wasn't a false positive because I took 3 different tests and they were all positive, but now I have the antibodies. Chris Jericho's positive COVID test coincides with Nick Jackson's case, where he recently opened up about testing positive with his own battle with COVID back in September too. Jericho and Jackson testing positive for COVID also coincides with a September COVID outbreak that affected Monday Night Raw. A month prior to that outbreak though, Jericho had performed at the Sturgis Rally and was later labelled as a super spreader event due to the lack of social distancing and mask wearing. Now, obviously, when this was announced yesterday, when Jericho made this revelation on his podcast, social media, rightfully so, exploded with this news because you start checking dates. You start checking dates when it comes to September, and I don't know. And I before I really heavily criticise Jericho or anything like that, I think it's fair that he said around some time of September. We don't know the exact dates there. I think that's really important because if you look at the amount of performances he had in September, he was a regular on Dynamite during that time. I think he was at every September Dynamite event, which was live, and he was at every September Dynamite taping as well. So people rightfully so said, well, if you tested positive, how could you appear here? How could you do that? I don't think it's the case of Jericho testing positive and performing at those events because Dynamite and AEW have a very, very strict COVID testing policy in the same way that WWE do right now. They test, it's slightly different. WWE tests their superstars for COVID the day before the show, and the following day they get their test results back, and then they find out what they're going to do on TV. AEW is different. AEW, they have an off-site place near Daly's Place in Jacksonville. They get the COVID test that day, and it's one of those rapid response ones, so they can find out whether or not they've tested positive 10, 15, 20 minutes afterwards. And it's more expensive, and it involves taking blood and all that kind of stuff, but that's the testing policy that they have. If they test positive, they're taken away, they can't go anywhere near Daly's Place, and they have to self-isolate and quarantine. If they test negative, they get a wristband, and the only way you can be even allowed into Daly's Place is by having one of those wristbands. So I don't think it's the case of Jericho testing positive and then being allowed to appear on Dynamite, being allowed to appear in Daly's Place. That to me is just farcical. I just really don't see that happening. I think it's more likely Jericho might have some of his dates wrong. He said it's sometime in September. I would assume maybe that might be early in September. I think if you look at the timeline here and trying to put together a correlation and a timeline, if you will, I think it was way more likely that he got it at the Sturgis event because we know that was a super spreader event. We know there was a massive spike of positive cases coming out of that event because there was no social distancing, because there was no mask wearing, because there was no hand sanitizing, and statistics have come out of that event and said it was a massive super spreader event. And that same mistake keeps getting made over and over again. It's infuriating of people saying, well, it's low here, we can do these events, and then they do it, and then suddenly, wouldn't you know it, everyone tests positive because that's how it works. That's how this virus works. It's absolute madness that people think that, I don't know. I don't want to get into that. But the whole point being that if Jericho is telling the truth, which I believe he is, I think maybe he just has his dates slightly skewed there, but he's recovered now. He didn't have any symptoms. That's the positive thing. So when it comes to that, that's the case. But it does fit in with the timeline of other times in September, like I mentioned previously, about having that massive outbreak that did affect WWE and AEW and other pro wrestling companies now. We've got an outbreak right now. So it certainly is interesting, but it's also curious, isn't it? Because once this news came out, suddenly people were straight on going, wow, that serves you right for appearing at this event. It serves you right for not believing, blah, blah, blah. There have been a lot of Chris Jericho stuff to come out in the last 7 days or so, whether it's this COVID test, whether it's obviously his lack of mask wearing in the past or his donations to a certain presidential campaign, which we won't get into. But there have been lots of stuff about Jericho coming out in the last 7 days or so. I don't think it's fair to dump on him for getting COVID-19. He's just saying his experience and his story from it. So I think that's the case when it comes to that. Let's go back to WWE and Monday Night Raw, because we have an update on Randy Orton, a storyline injury update on Randy Orton following Monday's fireball attack by Alexa Bliss to close Monday Night Raw. Now, as noted, at the end of this week's edition of Raw, Alexa Bliss interrupted the Randy Orton vs. Triple H main event. She stared down Randy Orton and then shot a fireball at his face. Raw then went off the air with Orton holding his face in pain. In an update, WWE's Storyline Injury Update notes that Randy Orton suffered minor burns to his face from the fireball. There's no word on what's next for the storyline, but WWE is promising another update on Randy Orton's condition during next week's edition of Raw. It was believed previously that Randy Orton would face The Fiend in a Firefly Funhouse match at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view on January 31. But of course, Randy Orton is also declared for the Royal Rumble match that night as well. So certainly we're going to get more updates when it comes to Randy Orton, his injuries, this fire feud that he has with Alexa Bliss and The Fiend. When will The Fiend return? I don't know. I thought it might be in the Royal Rumble match itself to eliminate Randy Orton. It might be before then, and they might have this Firefly Funhouse match. I think people have been criticising it for the supernatural element of it and the fireball stuff and all that kind of stuff. Like I mentioned before, it's The Fiend. That's the point. So I mean, it's interesting. It's interesting. I'm interested to see where it goes. I'm excited to see what happens next. I don't have a massive problem with it. We officially have an announcement when it comes to the Superstar Spectacle. Easy for me to say. WWE has officially announced the Superstar Spectacle event for Tuesday, January 26th. Now, there's no word yet on when the 2-hour event will air on the WWE Network. I think it's rumoured to be that day as well. But it will air at 8 p.m. Indian time in India on Sony 10.1 and Sony 10.3 and Sony Max. There will be commentary also in English and Hindi. It's also been reported that the event will tape next Thursday from the WWE Thunderdome at Tropicana Field in St. Petersburg, Florida. The event will feature superstars from NXT, Raw and SmackDown. Former WWE Champion Jinder Mahal has been announced for the show. It will, of course, be his first appearance since undergoing knee surgery in June of 2020. Other Indian talent announced for the event include the Bollywood Boys, Indus Sher, Jeet Rama, Kavita Devi, Guru Raj, Giant Sanjaya and Dilsha Shanky. Also announced for the card are WWE Champion Drew McIntyre, WWE Women's Tag Team Champion Charlotte Flair, SmackDown Tag Team Champions Robert Roode and Dolph Ziggler, Rey Mysterio, AJ Styles, Bayley, The New Day, Cesaro, Shinsuke Nakamura and Ricochet among others, plus an appearance by WWE Hall of Famer Ric Flair. So we officially have confirmation. It is going to be happening, or airing at least, on January 26th, and we have all of these WWE superstars being involved. As I mentioned, I'm really excited for it. I think it's a massive market to hit. The amount of fandom that's in India for pro wrestling is so underappreciated. Obviously, you look at the financial and marketing side of things, the population is there. It's a huge market that if you can really get invested in the product and be buying into your product, that's a lot of money for WWE. That's obviously, I think, their big paramount there. But when you come to actually just pro wrestling enjoyment, pro wrestling fandom, it's huge in India. And I don't think any company has really tapped into that the best way possible yet. Impact TNA tried way back in the day. Ring King with Jeff Jarrett. They tried to build a promotion out there. Impact have done various tours of India, which have been hugely successful for a smaller company like Impact. So imagine if WWE really doubled down and really hit that market hard. And I think this is the beginning of that. There's been rumors about NXT India as well. This might be the start of that. This might be a spin-off of that. Once they've really got their footprint involved, then that might be a start of it. So looks to be a big event. Depending on how the event is promoted, if it's a big deal, some of the matches that do happen, we might do a watch along here on the show. We'll see what happens. I think we'll get an indication on WWE TV over the next couple of weeks and months. Well, couple of weeks because it's at the end of the month. Over the next couple of weeks and days about what really, how big they're really promoting this show. If they're going big, if they're treating it like one of those Saudi shows, then we'll cover it heavily here on the show. But we'll cover all of the news about it anyway. So certainly going to be exciting for that. We have an injury update when it comes to AEW star Sonny Kiss, because Sonny Kiss has actually been absent from AEW TV for the last month or so. Now, during last night's AEW Dynamite post-show, Tony Schiavone was asked why AEW star Sonny Kiss had been off both AEW Dynamite and AEW Dark for nearly a month now. Now, Schiavone noted that Kiss is presently injured without providing further details of the injury. He said, quote, "He's been injured. I've seen him in the training room, so he's been banged up. I've seen him in the gym, but he's just not able to perform. He's a tremendous athlete." Sonny Kiss's last match was a loss to Miro on the December 22 episode of AEW Dark. His last match on Dynamite, though, was against Kenny Omega on October the 21st. Now, hopefully, he can recover soon. I'm a massive fan. I'm a huge fan. I really enjoyed the match with Cody Rhodes for the TNT Championship on Dynamite way back when. She's a tremendous athlete, an absolute unbelievable athlete. I think some of the preconceptions when talking about Sonny Kiss are just disgusting, to be honest. I think people need to get their head in the 21st century and out of the gutter. But I think Sonny Kiss is a phenomenal athlete, and I think there really is something there. There really is something there. There can be really a lot done there, and a lot of positive things done with the Sonny Kiss character in AEW. And I think AEW know that. So hopefully they can recover very, very quickly from their injury. Speaking of AEW as well, we have a match, the first match announced for the AEW Dynamite Beach Break special. Now, the waiting room with Britt Baker and Reba made its debut last night on AEW Dynamite New Year Smash Night 2. Cody Rhodes was the guest for the show, and after a brawl took place between Jade Cargill, who came out to chat with Cody, and Red Velvet, Thunder Rosa appeared on the big screen to break some news to Britt Baker. Rosa announced that AEW president Tony Khan wanted to give their match a big stage, and at AEW Dynamite Beach Break on February 3rd, the two would finally meet in the ring. The two wrestlers have been feuding for weeks, as Baker didn't feel that Rosa deserved to be in such a big promotion like AEW. So that's the big announcement for Beach Break. Of course, we also have for Beach Break announced it's the Kip Sabian and Penelope Ford wedding. It's been rumoured that Beach Break will actually take place from Miami because AEW Dynamite is going to be moving from Daly's place in Jacksonville to Miami, Florida. Rumours the reason why for that is because of just a change of scenery to lift the spirits and lift the moods and make things feel a bit different on television, but also because of the conditions at the time. Obviously, they're still performing outside when it comes to these Daly's Place TV tapings, and regardless of if it's Florida or not, it's still very cold. Of course, the Winter is Coming edition of Dynamite was legitimate because it was freezing, and a lot of the times some of the wrestlers have been complaining about the cold and about how difficult it is to work. You have to remember of how a pro wrestling ring is put together. It is, at the end of the day, underneath the mat, it is wooden panels. And if that's out in the cold and freezing temperatures, those panels get very hard. That's the big complaint sometimes when they hang rings above hockey ice rinks, and the fact that the panels get very hard and it's very difficult to bump on, and it hurts way more than it should or already does. So I think that's why they're moving to Miami for Beach Break. So we have the wedding, we have this match announced. I'm looking forward to this match. Thunder Rosa, even though she's not actually a proper contracted AEW talent, she's still got a contract with the NWA. I think she's the best female woman they have on the roster. I think she's the best female performer they have on that roster right now. I think she's fantastic. She absolutely is phenomenal, and I've been a big fan of hers for a while. Speaking of AEW as well, they have announced the first ever AEW Dynamite Awards Show. Now, AEW and TNT have announced the first annual AEW Dynamite Awards. The live stream will happen on Wednesday, January 22nd, and air via Bleacher Report on the app. Voting is now open at AEWawards.com. The AEW Dynamite Awards will celebrate the top AEW wrestlers and moments from the past year. Categories from the awards include Best Moment on the Mic, Biggest Surprise, Breakout Star, Male Breakout Star, Female Breakout Star, Biggest Breakdown, High Flyer Award, Hardest Moment to clean up after, the Biggest WTF Moment, LOL Award, Best Twitter Follow, and Bleacher Report Pay-Per-View Moment of the Year. Now, virtual presenters for this award show have been announced. This includes Shaquille O'Neal, Bert Kreisinger, Chael Sonnen, Curtis Granderson, Camille Kostek, Kevin Heffernan, Steve Lem, Ron Funches, Daniel Fishel-Karp, and Jensen Karp. I mean, I guess if you're in America, you would know who they are. I don't. The majority of them. I know a couple. But some of the categories I wanted to talk about, I think we'll probably do a video breaking down all of these categories and predictions for these. But what I do want to talk about is one category, which is Best Moment on the Mic, because I want to tell you the nominations for this one because it's crazy. Best Moment on the Mic is MJF We Deserve Better speech, Cody Rhodes accepts the dog collar match, Jon Moxley accepts the Inner Circle invitation, Brandy Rhodes confronts Jade Cargill, and Orange Cassidy debates Chris Jericho. Now, there's no doubt that all of those promos were good. Where is an Eddie Kingston promo in there? It's a disgrace. A disgrace that Eddie Kingston is not involved in that. It's a disgrace that Brody Lee's dog collar promo isn't involved in that. There are a ton of other promos that I think are far more deserving than being in that Best Moment on the Mic. Specifically, the Eddie Kingston Jon Moxley promo, by far, was the best promo in AEW last year. By a country mile, by an absolute mile. So I'm stunned that that's not in there. But I guess that's the case. But we'll do a video breaking down all of the other categories, because there are tons of them. There will be a ton of discussion involved in that. And finally, the NXT Fight Pit II match that was originally scheduled for New Year's Eve has been announced for next week's edition of NXT on the USA Network. The Fight Pit II bout between Timothy Thatcher and Tommaso Ciampa has been confirmed for next week's NXT episode on the USA Network. The match was originally announced for last week's NXT New Year's Eve special, but WWE did a minor injury angle with Thatcher so they could delay it until next week, or next week, likely due to timing or logistics issues. Tonight's or last night's episode of NXT featured Wade Barrett hosting a sit-down between Thatcher and Ciampa to promote next week's match. Thatcher said that he was that last week he was injured, but now he's good and ready to go. Ciampa warned that he's going to take every single liberty he wants next week, and Thatcher begged him to, adding that it won't be their last match. It won't be like their last match at NXT TakeOver War Games event because he's a different animal inside the fight pit. Thatcher went on and said that Ciampa looks like a man who is still questioning if he's still got it. Ciampa fired back and said that Thatcher has no idea what kind of a man he is, but he'll get that answer next week. So it's kind of what I predicted a couple of weeks ago when it comes to this whole fight pit deal. I felt that if they did do it on the NXT New Year's Eve place, it probably would be out of place because this is a big gimmick match. This is a big gimmick match. It shouldn't be sandwiched in the middle of a TV special. It shouldn't go 10 minutes because that was a packed show. You had non-commercial matches, you had NXT Championship matches, you had Last Woman Standing matches. The fight pit being in that show would have been too much, and it would have got lost in the shuffle, and it's too big of a gimmick match to get lost in the shuffle. So to me, it made the most sense to either have it in a main event of NXT, which is what it's going to be next week, or either on an NXT takeover. So I'm happy that it's happening next week. It makes the most sense logistically, creatively, all that kind of stuff. When it comes to Ciampa, I mean, I kind of agree. I mean, Tommaso Ciampa in 2018, one of the hottest characters and gimmicks in WWE. Of course, he broke his neck and came back from that. He doesn't feel like the same Tommaso Ciampa, not in terms of the ring, not in terms of the gimmick, just in terms of momentum. I don't think he's been booked the same. And I think that is something to address. So maybe they'll start to address that next week. But I'm certainly looking forward to that next week. But of course, as always, this is just one man's opinion. What are your thoughts on all the news stories we've spoken about today? Let me know your thoughts about all the stories we've spoken about, and let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll do my best to respond and reply to all of your comments. Really enjoy interacting with you guys, talking about WWE, AEW, Impact Wrestling, all things pro wrestling here on the channel. So get involved in the community, drop a comment below. All opinions are welcome. If you have enjoyed this video, please do smash a like on the like button. It really does help us out here on YouTube, go up the rankings and get into people's recommendation feeds if they haven't seen our videos previously. But most importantly, if you haven't already, please do subscribe to Wrestle News 365. You can do that by clicking the bottom right hand corner of the screen right now, or if you wait a few seconds, there'll be a subscribe button at the end of this video, along with another video for you to watch. Thank you very much for watching, listening, streaming, or have you come across this video today, and I'll speak to you again very, very soon. Hey guys, thank you for watching, listening, streaming, or however you come across this video today. Be sure to click on the video on the right there to watch our next video, or click the bottom there to subscribe, or the bottom right hand corner. Thank you very much, and I'll speak to you again very soon.